After working with creatives for the last 11 years, I've heard one statement more than any other. I hate marketing. I get it. It can be painful trying to figure out how to market your book or movie or comic. When I started podcasting, I had no clue how to do any of it. I was afraid of doing it wrong, looking like an idiot or making a marketing mistake that I could not recover from. It can be paralyzing. Sound familiar? If it does, let me see if I can help you. I got my MBA in marketing, so you don't have to. Sign up for a free session today to talk about your marketing goals and to see if we're a good fit. If nothing else, you'll get some insights that might ease your mind. Go to southgatesmallbusiness.com and sign up for a free session today. Welcome to Alley Chats. I'm your host, Rob Southgate. Alley Chats is a virtual artist alley featuring interviews with artists, filmmakers, podcasters, writers, really any creative person you might find at a pop culture convention. My goal is to help draw attention to cool people and to hopefully help them get some new fans. I want this podcast to raise up these amazing people and to inspire you, the listener, to chase your dreams as well. You can follow Alley Chats on Facebook and join the conversation. I'll add more social media in the future, but for now, that's the best place to interact with me. You can also email me directly if you would like to be a guest or have a guest suggestion. My email is rob@smgpods.com. Today's guest is Jay Bauer. Jay is a horror author that lives outside of St. Louis, Missouri in the forest of southern Illinois. He spends his time reading, writing, and convincing his wife the dark stories he writes do not involve her. He's the author of The Dark Sacrifice, the Dead Blood series, and Hanging Corpses. And he's a guest at the Books and Brews event coming up this August 3rd in Evanston, Illinois. There's a link in the show notes if you want to check it out. Anyway, here's Jay. Jay, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm really excited to have you here. Before I have you given your spiel about who you are, I just want to say the reason that I got the opportunity to talk to Jay is he is going to be at Books and Brews. You might be noticing a trend if you're listening to this podcast. I've got a whole bunch of horror authors that are going to be at Books and Brews at the Double Clutch Brewing Company in Evanston, Illinois on August 3rd. And I'm just having a blast talking to them. So that's why they're on Alley Chats. And Jay is one more of the horror authors that you're going to get to meet now, and he's awesome. And Jay, why don't you tell people who you are and give them a little background? Tell them what you do.
Yeah, sure thing, man. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate this. My name is Jay Bauer. I'm a horror author. I live down in the southern part of Illinois. I've got a bunch of books to my name. A lot of readers might know me by my book Cadaverous, or my other book, Hanging Corpses, or even Dead Blood. My newest one is The Terror of Willow Falls. And I've got more coming out before the event, so a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, the cover for the one coming out July 2nd, Sleeper Train.
Oh, man.
I mean, I'm looking at the cover. I'm like, well, I'm going to see that on my shelf soon enough. Yeah, this is fantastic. I'm really excited to talk to you. These books look just so amazing. Here's been the problem. I didn't know I was going to be doing this, so I haven't had a chance to read half the books.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at these like, ooh, you're going to tell me about it because I don't know anything about it, but your covers are killing me, man.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, thank you.
They're so cool. So, okay. Let's start there. So you said Terror of Willow Falls is the latest book.
Yes.
That's come out. Okay.
Yes.
And it's an Eyebiter novel. Is Eyebiter a series?
It was sort of. So last fall, I released a collection of novellas with John Durgan and John Lynch, and John Durgan's going to actually be at Books and Brews as well.
Oh, great.
We released a collection called the Conservators Collection, Derelict, and we each wrote a novella based on the concept of derelict or abandonment. And mine in that was called Eyebiter's Revenge. and it was about this creature called an eye biter.
Hey,
It's
you're
basically
killing me with that name, man. I
right.
always say I'm not scared of things. Eye things bother me. The name eye biter makes me want to crawl out of my skin.
Yes, well, me too, and that's why I enjoyed writing it. I have a thing with eyes. I have a couple books about it, but this one, a lot of readers really liked Eye Biter's Revenge, and they really liked this creature, and they were like, I want to know more about this eye biter. I want to know more, like, where'd it come from? What's it all about?
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, story. So then I wrote The Terror of Willow Falls as a prequel origin story for the eye biter creature.
Okay.
So I'm actually writing a second book now that's going to should bridge the gap between Willow Falls and Eye Biter's Revenge. So then it will kind of be a series at that point.
Okay.
So with the two out now, they can be read in any order. It doesn't really matter. But having this next one will kind of make it so that you really would want to go in order on that. But
I will. How's that
yeah.
sound? And you also mentioned Hanging Corpses. This is another one with an absolutely stupendous cover.
Yeah, thank you.
Now you said people know you from that one, so that was a big hit for you.
Yeah, so that was a short story collection.
Oh,
And
I'm in. I
yeah,
love that.
and it was kind of released, and I've said this before, it was released kind of as an afterthought, which is terrible to say. But I had just released a three-book series called Dead Blood, which was a zombie series that has a main character as a vampire. So it was like a vampire dropped into the Walking Dead is the best way to explain it. And I had gotten a bunch of new readers at that point, and I was like, oh, I'm going to write more in this series, but I needed time. So I was like, you know what? I have all these. Well, let me back up a little bit. I got the cover first,
Okay.
and I had a short story called The Hanging Corpses of Cuyahoga County because I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio.
Oh,
And
I know Cuyahoga.
yeah,
Cuyahoga. I don't know how to say it. I know that
either
area.
way,
We
man.
have relatives there.
And so I got the cover for free actually, and I shortened the story because that was a too long of a title. So I changed it to just Hanging Corpses, and I posted it on Twitter because my thought was I was going to do this as a freebie, like a free short story to give to readers signing up to my newsletter, right? So I posted it, and people went nuts over it. They were like, "Oh my God, this is awesome! Like this is great! I don't know what this is, but I'm buying it." And I was like, oh, I
Oh,
should do something with this then,
right.
So I had all these short stories, and uh, I, so I was like, you know what? I'm going to make this a collection instead of just one story. And then I published it, and most short story collections tend to not sell well. This was an exception, and people were buying it. And then the Books of Horror Indie Brawl last year, the very first one, that book made it into the brawl. I guarantee you, based solely on that cover,
Yeah, the
because
cover's
people,
awesome.
yeah. And so I made it to the brawl. I got crushed the first round because it's a
It's a
short
brawl.
story. Yeah, yeah. A short story collection going up against a novel usually doesn't win, and I didn't. I got smashed, which was fine, but it brought me a lot of attention, and it brought a lot of new readers to discover who I was and what I brought to the table. And so that one really, really exceeded any expectation I could have had.
Yeah. Well, it looks incredible, and it's funny to me because I'm in that world too. Uh, and yeah, I know short story collections don't sell as well, but damn, half my shelf is short story collections. I love them.
Yeah.
But I was a big sci-fi guy like Theodore Sturgeon and uh Philip K. Dick. Like they had tons of short stories. Harlan Ellison, I was big on those. And then we get
Yeah.
into like my entry point into probably when I was a kid, the first horror was Stephen King's short stories.
Hmm.
I ate them up like they were the greatest. So,
Yes.
okay, let's ask a question about this. What do you think? What qualities make a good short story?
So you have to kind of you have to be able to give the reader a sense that they've finished a story, and not just like as a chapter of a bigger piece, but they have to have a beginning and kind of feel like they have an end to it.
Sure.
I used to write a lot of flash fiction, which is super short stories. and you had to get into it right away. So you didn't really have a lot of time to do backstory or anything like that, but you had to get right into it, bring the reader into the action like immediately. So I've also noticed for me, a lot of my short stories tend to be in first person because for me, that's more immediate, right? Like if you're reading a book and it's like, I did this or I did that, you're automatically drawn right into that character versus third person, which sometimes will take a little bit longer to get into that feel. So I've noticed for me, a lot of my short stories are first person, but I like to bring the reader immediately right into it and have them follow that story arc from beginning to end. And it's like a slice of life kind of thing, right? Like there's obviously something before and there will be something after the events of the story, but you get a full beginning and end in that story.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, okay. So what qualities does a story have to be good horror? And it doesn't have to be a short story. I mean, just in general.
Ooh, you know,
I know I'm asking the tough questions,
that
man.
is a tough question because what's scary and horrific to one person is not always the same to someone else,
Yeah.
right? Like
An eye
you,
biter is definitely scary as hell.
right? Yeah, right. Like that scares me, and so I guess for me, then a lot of the stuff that I do write, as to what makes it a good horror story is what scares me. Things that might bother me or frighten me. That's what I'll write about because like I can feel those emotions of the characters. I can feel the fear of those characters because I'm experiencing that. And I know that will resonate with somebody. It's not going to resonate with everybody because there are some people who are like, well, eye biter is stupid. That's just a goofy thing. And that's fine. That everyone's got their opinion. But for me, it's like this thing's creepy as hell. Like I don't want this thing, coming at me and cutting out my eye and eating it or, I
Oh,
don't, you know. So um, it's making it personal from my point of view, because I know that will resonate with certain readers.
want more shows like this? We've got a lot more on the Southgate Media Group Patreon page. Some free, some paid. Plus, there's exclusive content for subscribers only. Follow the link in the show notes or look up Southgate Media Group on Patreon and check out the cool stuff we're doing over there. You won't be sorry. On August 3rd, 2024, Books of Horror is presenting Books and Brews at Double Clutch Brewing Company in Evanston, Illinois. There will be over 40 horror authors for a book signing and meetup from 10 a.m. until 4 p.m. that day. Meet your favorite authors, discover new authors, meet Books of Horror friends in real life, including the author I'm talking with on this podcast. Oh, and I'll be there too. This is an all ages event. Food, alcohol, and non-alcoholic beverages will be available. No outside food or drinks will be allowed. Search for Books of Horror Presents Books and Brews on Facebook events for more information, or click on the link in the show notes. I hope to see you there. What is it that inspired you to start writing originally?
I go back to college actually, and my freshman year, English class, right? I we had to write something about like what did you do this past summer? One of those assignments.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I did that, but I wanted to do it differently because that just sounded boring. And so I was like, I want to try this from like the point of view of my best friend, whose girlfriend that him and his girlfriend were together all throughout high school, and she broke up with him right after we graduated high school. And
Ouch.
so he had like that whole kind of like depressed kind of take on that whole summer. And so I wrote it from his point of view, describing me as through his depression. And I was like, man, this is fun. This is really cool. And of course, I failed that class, but because
Hey.
I hated turning in homework and I didn't. And
Yeah.
so, um, but in any case, that kind of what really started it for me. And I used to write like crappy poetry when I was in high school, that sappy,
Yeah.
crap. And but that was what really started the creative side. But then I found history and I was like, English majors, they don't make any money. Well, history majors don't either. It's like the same thing. But I went history instead. So I got away from the creative writing for gosh, 10, 15 years. Like it was a while. And
Sure.
then I finally just started as like, I want to do this. So I had a blog and I was writing short stories every month. And then NaNoWriMo is what finally got me into writing longer
Oh,
fiction.
interesting.
And I failed the first couple times I tried that, and then I succeeded. And then I had like six wins, if you will, with that
Wow.
writing, that first draft of a novel in a month. But that's what forced me to buckle down and actually write a longer piece was NaNoWriMo. So kind of a long way of getting around to writing there.
So what was it about horror? Why did
Oh
why did
man,
you end up in horror?
I've always loved that. I mean, that was, the first book I ever read of my own volition, not for school, not for anything else, was Pet Cemetery.
Oh,
Um,
oh my
my,
God. That was the best book when I read it
oh,
when I was a teenager also.
yeah.
I mean, you want to talk about a book that scared me? That might be the first one that I actually walked away. I was like, I'm very upset by this book.
My mom was and is still a big Stephen King fan. And, they were always around the house. And I saw that and I was like, this looks cool. And I was already kind of into like horror movies and stuff at that point. Like I've always loved that stuff.
Yeah.
And so I picked it up and I was like, this is amazing. I love this, So I just was always drawn to that. And that was it. We all have a story of I read Stephen King when I was too young kind of
Yeah.
thing, right? We
Right.
we all have that, and it's stuck with us.
Do you remember in Pet Cemetery? Because for me, there's a very distinct moment that was the one. Was there something in there that like it was the thing that gripped you that made you go like, first of all, it's terrifying. Second of all, I'm all in. This just made this a lifelong obsession.
I don't remember that because I haven't reread it.
Okay.
I tend to not reread things just because there's so many other things I want to get to.
Yeah.
But it just, I think for me, not only was it the content, right? Like I just love, again, I was already kind of interested in that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
but not just that, but I think it was his style. Just, it was so like engaging
Yeah.
and I could read it and it wasn't over my head. It wasn't talking down to me. It was, I can grasp this language. I can get to the meaning. I can get into this. And that really just drew me in, especially him in particular, to bring me into the fold of horror, and that really. But I don't remember a particular piece or scene from the book. What was it for you?
I can tell you because it's not in the movie. It's the scene when they're going through the woods heading to the pet cemetery,
Mhm.
and there's like a creature in the woods. You hear these footsteps, and I think it's supposed to be like a Native American lore,
Mhm.
like creature. But I read that, and it like, and then he drops it, and the rest of the book, I was like, this thing is out there, and he's like just ignoring it, like it's not even. Oh my God! And it just was so upsetting to me. But in a good way, like obviously,
Right.
because then I was like, every book, I'm like, he starts tying things together. I'm like, he's going to bring that damn thing back. It's going to show up. It's going to be in Needful Things. It's going to be in, whatever. So yeah, that was my moment. Thanks for
Nice.
interviewing me. I appreciate you
Yeah.
having me on your show.
Anytime,
Uh,
man. Anytime.
so who do you say right now are your three favorite horror writers? I'm putting you on the
Ooh,
spot. I want to hear three.
yeah, man, you did throw me on the spot. Duncan Ralston has always been a favorite of mine. He'll actually be at Books and Brews.
Yep.
He's my mom's favorite horror author, not her son, but Duncan, but whatever. I'm not bitter. But I love his stuff. I think it's so well written and it's very engaging. And I always enjoyed every book of his that I've read. Um, Probably say Ian Rob Wright. He's from the UK. And again, his stuff for me, it's easily, I can get into these stories and I can read them super fast. And I really, really enjoy that. Um, Man, a third one, you really are putting me on the spot here. Uh, Gosh.
Notice I'm not turning the heat down either.
No, you're not. You're not. And that's okay. Uh, Oof, I don't know. Let's, probably John Durgan. And he's also going to be there. He was one of the three of us that wrote with the Conservators Collection. But I've read everything he's written. I'm reading now some things that are going to be coming out. And I've told him this before, but my book, Cadaverous, which is in the Brawl this year, was partially inspired by his book, The Curse Among Us. You know, the whole coming of age type of idea and concept and stuff. It was that had a part in me creating that book. So, but like I said, I've read everything of his. I've always enjoyed it. It's super engaging. He's a really nice guy.
And you know what? It's fair enough. Tomorrow you might give me three different authors. So it's fair enough. I threw a curveball at you. Okay. This is, I think this is a hard question. And this is one that I actually have written down. But I like it because my answers have been so cool. What has writing horror taught you about the world and yourself?
Wow, that's a great question.
I know, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm sure I stole it from somewhere.
Yeah, that's all right. It's okay. So what has taught me about about the world is that it can be a scary place and there are lots of things to be afraid of, but there's also a lot of things that um so isolation is a big part, I think, of a lot of horror. You know, when you're outside of a group, you know, if it's just you going out into the woods by yourself, it's pretty damn scary, right? But if it's you and a group of friends and there's five, six of you, it's not as scary, right? So we need each other is what
Yeah.
I've kind of discovered it. I kind of knew that, but really when you're writing horror, you really sense that like you need others. You have to be able to trust and rely on others. And when all of that breaks down, that's when you have horror. You know, that's when a lot of things can turn bad and turn pretty scary. And so um, I think that's kind of what's taught me a lot about the world is that being by ourselves, being isolated is scary. But when we can get together as a group, we can overcome those fears. And then for me personally, um, it's to be able to get into these dark places and be able and learn what it's like to be in those dark places, but also to be able to jump out of that. Like I don't live in those dark places. You know, I'm not head to toe in black, and I'm not like, you know, everything's not gloomy. I'm a pretty happy guy. I'm a pretty positive kind of person. But I can get into these places and explore things that I normally wouldn't on my own, you know, in real life, and enjoy that, but be able to step back and know that I don't have to live in those places, you know.
The whole time you were talking about how the world, the isolation, all that, I was thinking about our conversation about King, and I was like, yeah, Georgie wouldn't have put his arm in the sewer if there had been a few kids with him to say, "That's a clown. Don't do
Right,
it." You know,
right. You know,
he's
we need.
isolated and he's making weird choices because he's getting played off of that, and
Mhm.
it's very true. It's very true. I just watched a documentary about a cult, and I'm like, yeah, as soon as they isolate certain people, that's when they fall for it. Whether they're super intelligent or it's that isolation that can let that happen. It's very
Yeah,
scary.
yeah. And you think about it, so many different stories and so many different movies. Um, when you start isolating from others, and whether it's um, actual physical isolation or whatever, it's more metaphorical, maybe it's mental, whatever it is, when you start getting into that, that's when, you know, those fears creep in because
Yeah.
you don't have that support around you, you know, and that's something I hadn't really thought of a lot out, you know, before I really started getting into doing more and more stories. But lately, I've thought more and more about that. Like it really is kind of this whole isolation in various ways, right? It's not just you in a room by yourself, but there's all kinds of different ways to be isolated,
Right.
and that's where a lot of that fear comes from.
It's why we're going to have a lot of really exciting horror coming out after post COVID, you know,
Yeah.
because so many people experienced it, whatever degree,
Yep.
and it caused their minds to do things. So that'll be very interesting to see where that goes. So, Jay, uh, couple more things. Number one, Jay, you can meet Jay, get a signature, get a selfie, uh, bite his eyeball. That's very weird.
No,
At
please don't
Books
do
and
that.
Brews
Yeah.
at the Double Clutch Brewing Company in Evanston, Illinois on August 3rd of 2024, because this will live on. Uh, So there you go. Definitely check him out. Definitely go to that. The links will be in the show notes as well as any of his social media. So engage with him. You said you have a newsletter, so sign up for his newsletter. Always sign up for newsletters and support the authors and give them reviews too. That really helps.
Yes, they do.
So, all right, Jay, other than Books and Brews, what have you got coming up?
Yeah, so actually the weekend before that, I'm going to be in Texas. So I'm going to be at the Texas Author Con the weekend before. It's going to be down in Dallas. So I'm going to be doing a lot of driving. So I'm going from Dallas to Chicago. The month after that, I'm going to be in Knoxville, Tennessee for TBR Con. It's in early September. Then early October, I'm going to be in St. Louis for AuthorCon from the Scares That Care AuthorCon St. Louis. I'll be at that event.
Awesome.
And then a couple weeks after that, I'm going to be in Bloomington, Illinois for Tomes of Terror.
Wow. Oh, I didn't know. When is that?
It's like the last Saturday of the month, maybe it's like the 25th or something like that. It's a one-day event in Bloomington, hosted by Bob's Bay Books, who's actually going to be at Books and Brews.
Wow. And now that you've said this, I'm going to see if I can make it, depends on what I got going, to Bloomington. That's my dad's hometown.
Oh, is it? Nice.
Yep. It's right next to Normal. So my big joke is it's the closest my dad ever was to Normal.
There you go.
Yeah. The other funny thing about it is we went and I took my wife there when we were dating. We're driving through the town. And, my dad, when he grew up there, it was Mayberry. It was a tiny little town.
Yeah.
And we're driving through and he never went to reunions. He's not, whatever.
Right.
We're driving away, and all of a sudden we see a sign that says Southgate, which is our last name. My wife goes, "Oh my gosh, why does it say your name?" I'm like, "I don't know." We pull over, and it is literally the crappiest trailer park you've ever seen in your life. And I'm like, "That's awesome," because anybody he went to high school with is probably like, "Did he open a trailer park?"
Nice.
Yeah. So, all right. Enough about my dad. Jay, it was really great to talk to you. I cannot wait to meet you at Books and Brews. And once again, everybody follow him, buy his books, see his amazing covers. They need to be on your shelf.
Yes, they do. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you for coming on, Jay.
Yeah, man.
It would really help me out if you would rate and review this show on whatever platform you use to listen to this podcast. Good reviews help others find the show, which ultimately helps the people I've interviewed get more exposure. You can connect with me on social media or via email. All the links are found in the show notes. If you like this show, you'll like other shows from Southgate Media Group as well, such as Read Between the Lines, a podcast featuring insightful interviews with some of the hottest authors out there, or Go Fund This, a podcast where we interview people about their amazing crowdfunding projects. You can find our shows wherever you listen to podcasts, so give them a try. And if you like what you hear, don't forget to rate and review our shows. It really helps other people find them and keep our team inspired. Alley Chats is a production of Southgate Media Group, hosted, produced, and edited by me, Rob Southgate. Thanks again for listening to Alley Chats.